I remember my mother coming to school, elementary school, giving a presentation about Palestine. This is a pre-9/11 era. And, one of my friends, I had no idea. You're from where Jesus is from, right? So
you're probably like 15 years old when 9/11 happened.
I literally had a friend that told other people, I think Omar joined the Taliban or something. When Muhammad Ali, may Allah have mercy on his soul, passed away, man, Quran's playing on Fox News, it's playing on CNN from his funeral. The whole country seems to be captured by this man. But you see people coming out of those prisons, those underground prisons. It's crazy. Nothing else matters that Joe Biden did. It is all genocide. He is Genocide Joe until today.
As a Palestinian, when you saw that, and as a Muslim and as an Arab, how did you feel?
The Bush era put into play the infrastructure for pretty much everything terrible that's happening right now. Obama actually, while paying symbolic heed to the Muslim community, furthered those structures. Mamdani, definitely his election represents the collapse of AIPAC. I'm always happy when Zionist billionaires lose a lot of money. But at the same time, I don't think that the policy level, Mamdani is going to be revolutionary in any way. We're not going anywhere. We're just not going to go away. And I think that's the Palestinian superpower. Is it okay if I keep my feet on the ground?
If you, whatever's comfortable, keep okay. No, because you also are tall. So that's why when I realized how tall you are, I was thinking, I wonder how you're going to... Sepan, when you want to calm me down, you can. Hi, good day. Welcome to another episode of Unapologetic. I'm your host, Ashfaq Kareem, and I'm very honored today. I'm in Doha once more, speaking to Omar Suleiman, Sheikh Omar Suleiman. How are you doing?
Good. It's good to be with you. Alhamdulillah.
It's good to see you. Sheikh Omar Suleiman would probably be familiar to most of your viewers. World-renowned Islamic scholar, also a Palestinian who is also American, Palestinian-American, and has been extremely outspoken about the U.S. government's support of Israel, Israel's awful atrocities that they've been carrying out in Gaza. Sheikh Omar, just to start off with, how has the last 2 years changed how you think about the world?
I don't know if it's necessarily changed the way I think about the world. It's only probably validated my greatest concerns with the world. And I think that's probably true for a lot of us. So we've witnessed in the last 2 years, not just the capacity for evil that exists in this world, but the capacity for indifference. So it's not that we witnessed the genocide, it's that we normalized witnessing the genocide, if that makes sense. So if Gaza can be witnessed and be met with such global inaction, then everything after Gaza can also be witnessed and be met with such global inaction. And we're seeing that with Sudan. Of course, Sudan, the atrocities that are being carried out there, the genocide there is parallel to Gaza, but for many factors, the visibility has been limited, unjustifiably, of course. But you see, at Fast should come out, some things happen where it catches the global attention for a moment, right? The visibility is there just for a moment. And you realize there's nothing that the world can see in its present form, with its present infrastructure, that will move it out of inaction, unfortunately. And I hope that will cause us to rethink the systems that exist in this world today and to reshape those systems to be more towards justice for the oppressed, wherever they may be. So I think it didn't change the way I view the world. It just validated the worst concerns that I had about the world.
Okay, so you say it validated the worst concerns you had. You were probably 15 years old when 9/11 happened.
Yeah.
You were kind of born just preceding the Intifada, the first Intifada, probably a little kid when Iraq War I takes place,
right.
And almost about to enter college or finishing school when Iraq
right.
II. How did those events, those political events, sort of shape your decision to go into the line of work you have? I wouldn't call it a line of work necessarily, but to study Islam and be outspoken in terms of global injustice.
So when 9/11 happened, I actually was already overseas studying. So that's one. But I'd say prior to 9/11, my consciousness was shaped by things that were happening in my childhood. So, my parents made sure that I knew very much so that we were not organically in the United States because someone was seeking opportunity, but because people were trying to make the best out of an occupation that led my parents to meet in Houston, Texas, as students and to thrive, because the Palestinian people have shown not just an amazing sense of resilience where they are right now, even under occupation, but even in the diaspora, their ability to thrive under the worst of circumstances. And so they thrived, but they made sure that we understood that our story was a story of exile, and that as comfortable as we were, that we needed to return home at some point, and that home was where our generations, had resided. And while we were very much so taught to contribute and to be part of the American fabric, and again, fully Palestinian, fully American, at the same time, we understood that our story was rooted in Palestine. And that, my mother had a poem that I quote frequently, أنا من أرض فلسطين نبأت وفي كل الأرض زرعت ولكلمة الله أكبر سجدت. It was one of her poems that, we were planted in Palestine, but we grew all over the earth, and we prostrate only to the greatness of God. And so I understood very early on that I was rooted in Palestine. And in fact, I remember my mother coming to school, elementary school, giving a presentation about Palestine. This is a pre-9/11 era, and one of my friends, I had no idea you're from where Jesus is from, right? So, teacher welcomed it, and it was students welcomed it, and it was something that was very natural in terms of the welcoming feeling towards it. And that's a pre-9/11 era in the Deep South in Louisiana, right? But also Bosnia had a huge part of shaping my consciousness. We had Bosnian refugees stay with us. And then confronting domestic injustices. Like, what was so beautiful about my parents was that the injustice that was committed towards them was not the only thing that they were able to carry in their conscience, but they immediately embedded themselves in struggles in the Deep South against racism, against poverty. And so I grew up in protests, hearing the poetry of my mother, having refugees in proximity. The Iraq War, I actually remember Iraq War 1. Yeah, I was young, but I remember being glued to the TV. I remember watching my parents and interpreting the world through their eyes as a kid. It's one thing, like, when you think about your childhood memories, and you don't just remember what you were seeing, but you remember what your parents were looking at. So I remember, several times as a child, when I did not understand something, I simply looked at my mom's eyes or I looked at my dad's eyes, and I analyzed how wet their eyes became, how red their eyes became. I analyzed every facial expression, and that's how I got to interpret the world and say, oh, something really bad is happening. Because I didn't have the emotional maturity yet to understand what was happening, but I could see their eyes. And, that's a whole, a whole nother subject, right, of just personal tribulation, my mother's sickness. Like, if my mom was going to the hospital again, I learned as a 6, 7, 8-year-old to look at my dad's face and say, oh, mom's in trouble again, mom's sick again, right? So in similar ways, I learned to interpret from their faces, the world is sick again. The world is sick again. Bosnia, Iraq, Kashmir, Palestine, always. So, and then again, racism, another Klan incident, KKK incident around the corner. Like, we knew this stuff growing up, right? So when 9/11 happened, I think the magnitude of it was shocking, right? Mysterious, skepticism for sure, but predictable in terms of the backlash that followed. While I was away, it happened, and I was communicating at that time through, AOL Instant Messenger and things that are ancient now, right? Because the internet's coming out in 1996, and that's when, communication, emails. And then I came back to the United States in the summer of 2002, and I was like, whoa, okay.
Things are very different.
It was like stepping into a different world, right? And it showed me how fragile the arrangement actually is.
You say the arrangement. What's the arrangement?
Tolerance, coexistence, the emptiness of slogans and mottos that facts don't matter. Objectivity goes out the window when people feel like they've been attacked. All of that just stopped mattering. I actually remember the Oklahoma City bombing, because remember, I'm in the South.
Yes.
Again, I'm a kid, but I'm interpreting things through my parents, right? I remember Timothy McVeigh. I remember my dad speaking to local news stations as a professor in, at that time, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, responding to newscasters like, oh, so now that it's not a Muslim. I remember that, right? So it showed again how fragile the whole arrangement is. I don't want to say how superficial it is, because I think for some people, they actually believe those slogans, if that makes sense, until something happens, because we're emotional creatures. And so that's what propaganda does. It leads into your insecurities and then creates a false narrative out of that insecurity that causes you to depart from all of your principles. So I saw that with friends, I saw that with neighbors, I saw that with people growing up. It's kind of like how now you go on social media and you're like, wow, that colleague, that person that's known me for years is a genocide apologist. And there's no other way to put it, right? It's a complete racist, right? And I'll keep my language
More respectful.
yeah, more respectful. But
I mean, some would say it's disrespectful to kind of hold back.
I mean,
it's a weird.
You asked me what the world's been like for 2 years, and there are a lot of things I say on the inside that I don't say on the outside, right? But when I see certain things, let's just say that I say things on the inside that are unlike me to say.
Yeah, of course.
But it is what it is.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, alhamdulillah, all praise is due to God that, when the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says how amazing is the affair of the believer because all of his affairs are good. When bad happens, he is patient and he still sees perspective, and that's better for him. And when good things happen, he is grateful, and that is better for him. So that also exists in the collective sense, that the believer has the ability to interpret everything that happens to him or her as being in their favor, collectively or individually. That doesn't mean that you have to root out the incredible ugliness or absolve the criminal of the crimes that they committed and just simply relegate that all to God's will. You can still see the ugliness of everything that's happened, but still believe that there's beauty in it happening to you and around you and with you and for you. So the people of Gaza, they demonstrate that. We don't have the right to say, oh, people of Gaza, this is good for you. But the people of Gaza will still recognize the great evil of what has been done to them and know exactly who the criminals are, and we can point to the criminals, but still say that I can respond to this in a way that will be better for me because my life does not end with death and my perspective is not relegated to what I can simply see. So that is the way the believer interprets the world, by understanding that there's something greater than the world and that they have to simply find their greatest role no matter what's happening in their domain. They have to find their greatest intervention and put forth their greatest effort sincerely, and that everything will play out in a way that will be favorable in the end.
Yeah, you mentioned, there's two things I want to pick up on. So the first is you mentioned how fragile the whole world is, and because I was a bit older than you when 9/11 happened. I was already at college, and when the Iraq War, first it's Afghanistan and then Iraq, and the second Intifada. So I was kind of informed when I was at university, and I'm South African, so when I was much younger, I saw my country be liberated, and that also obviously informed me a lot.
Right.
And then you kind of saw by like 2006, 7, 8, remorse. It's clearly now superficial remorse in the Western media. Oh, we kind of messed up it was false evidence, it was botched evidence. I think the New York Times wrote an apology for their coverage at some point around sort of the 2011, 12s, 13s, 14s, as opposed to Fox News, sort of left-leaning liberal media started, having interesting features on hijabi women doing something or whatever the case is.
Right.
And then literally, October 7th happens, and the most seasoned correspondents were here explaining why the Israelis should now go and be able to carpet bomb Gaza. And so, it was a very, very painful moment, just seeing that hypocrisy. But coming back to the stories of your mom and dad.
Can I just comment on that for
absolutely.
a moment? I think in the United States, to be honest with you, it wasn't a smooth curve. Not that you were suggesting that, but a lot of the in-between is so much more significant.
Absolutely.
So San Bernardino, when Muhammad Ali, may Allah have mercy on his soul, passed away, Quran's playing on Fox News, it's playing on CNN from his funeral. Like the whole country seems to be captured by this man who, it's as if he dies at just the right time to remind America that, perhaps the greatest American of the 20th century was a proud Muslim. And then it was like just a few days after, the Pulse LGBT nightclub shooting happens. And it's like, oop, back to square one. Right when you're up, and then San Bernardino happens. Pulse happens. Like, it's just like, you're going up and then boom,
Yeah.
Up, boom. And so the bigotry does not only does it return, but it returns with a worse vengeance. And there's a policy implication of that as well, which is that, like, the Bush era put into play the infrastructure for pretty much everything terrible that's happening right now, even to ICE, by the way, because DHS was created in the Bush era. ICE was born out of DHS, right? So Bush set into motion surveillance, the Patriot Act, and all that. Obama, not only did he not stop that, Obama actually, while paying symbolic heed to the Muslim community, furthered those structures, right? So countering violent extremism in the name of CV, the surveillance was only further entrenched. It took on a different veneer, but it was still the same structure that was extending and embedding, right? You know, so you then dealt with Trump 1.0, and then Biden, of course. To me, his entire legacy is defined by the genocide. Like, nothing else matters that Joe Biden did. It is all genocide. He is Genocide Joe until today, even if he doesn't remember being Genocide Joe. He is Genocide Joe. And Trump 2.0, in my mind, is taking all the ugliness, all the viciousness over the years, all the bumps on the road, and with this administration and with the types of people that are driving his agenda, just, you know, carrying out, I think, the greatest fear of what we had would happen in 1.0, Trump 1.0. So there are a lot of bumps along the way, and now it's kind of...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that, you know, you kind of conscientized by your parents and their stories of exile, and letting you know that, you know, you are exiled, you are here because you're exiled. Tell us more about, you know, what happened to them and their sort of 48 or whatever year it is, what that story is.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. My father was born in 1943. So he was 5 when it happened.
Where was he living at the
In
time?
Palestine.
He was born in Palestine.
Tulkarm.
Tulkarm, okay.
Yeah, he was born in Tulkarm, and he remembers everything. My father stayed in Palestine. You know, so we still actually technically have land in Tulkarm. I have cousins there. I have family that lives there. I have land in my name that I can't access, but it's there. And of course, being encroached upon systematically. So Tulkarm, you know, we're from there. My mother, may Allah have mercy on her, was born in 1951 in Damascus. So her family temporarily left.
Okay.
She was born in Damascus.
Her family was from where in Palestine?
Nablus.
Nablus, okay.
Yeah. They went back. So they went to Kuwait for some time. Then eventually they went back to Palestine. She grew up in Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Ramallah, went to Bir Zaid, taught in Ramallah, then to Lebanon, studied at AUB, American University of Beirut. Then eventually, you know, after circling the entire Bilad al-Sham, so she lived in Palestine, Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon, she settled in Houston. So her and her family settled in Houston. My father left, you know, to go to Medina in the late 50s, lived there until the 60s. Then after, you know, working hard to get through whatever he could in terms of his academic studies, Europe and what have you, ends up in Houston as well. So my parents met as students at University of Houston. So they didn't have any family connection prior. There was one masjid in Houston that was established at the time that my father was there, which is just remarkable if you know Houston and the Houston Muslim community now. That same mosque, the late Dr. Mazhar Qazi, the father of Dr. Yasir Qadi, may Allah have mercy on Dr. Mazhar, he and my father were in the same mosque. There was one mosque at the time in Houston, right, where there are hundreds now. So yeah, it's an incredible story, I think, of people that fought through every obstacle, every hardship. Father became a professor of chemistry, established some of the most prestigious chemistry programs in the country, and became you know, one of the most distinguished professors in his field. My mother finished a degree in poetry, Arabic literature and poetry, or Arabic literature, and then another degree in finance. Worked in the finance world, was just an incredible humanitarian. And both of them really shaped our conscience as kids, because we knew all along that every refugee in the world had a home in our home. Every cause was embedded in our conscience. Like, I knew about Nelson Mandela as a kid, you know, and I was, I actually remember being, you know, since you're from South Africa, I remember like explicitly in 4th grade fourth grade, saying Mandela's name. And then students look at me like, who's that? So it's like, I'm like, you don't know who Nelson Mandela is? And I was a fourth grader, but it was like, because we were globalized in that sense very early on. And I'm grateful for that experience because it, I had a head start in what I do today.
You say as kids, so you have siblings?
One brother. Yeah,
one brother. He's older or younger than you?
Older.
Older. Okay. And in terms of your sort of extended family on your mother's side and your father's side, have they also settled in the USA? Are they, some of them still living in Palestine? Are they? What's their diaspora? Or
really interestingly enough, so my father's family almost all stayed in Palestine, remained in Turkaram. Some extended relatives went to Gaza, others in Jordan. I've gone to Jordan multiple times, so I have a lot of family in Jordan. My mother's side, her siblings, all settled in the United States, and the ones that passed away, all passed away in the United States. Only two of my aunts, are still living in the U.S. So her and her siblings that all passed away in the United States. They all came to the U.S., settled in Houston, then went out to Philadelphia and Arizona and Chicago and different parts of the country. But yeah, my father's family either died in Palestine or in Jordan. My father's the baby of the family, so I can give you an idea, right? So my first cousins are like I tend to be the age of my second cousins, not even my first cousins, right?
I understand, yeah.
So most of them have passed away in Palestine. Some of them in Gaza as well, extended relatives. But yeah, that's our diaspora story.
Do you have family that's been in Gaza over the last 2 years? Probably quite distant.
By extent, but again, I never met most of my family that even lived in Palestine because I tried to get into Palestine, but I wasn't allowed to get in, so I was denied entry. So
what's your border story? What's your try to get in story?
Oh man, look, my border story is through the bridge in Jordan. I tried to get in through there, and this was before I was active in any way. This was just based on family dynamics and things of that sort as a teenager. So you can either fly into the airport, right, in Tel Aviv, or you can go through the bridge. My idea was that, if you get turned away in Jordan, it's not that big of a deal because you can just go back to your family, right? But they really make it a point to try to psychologically damage you to where you'd never want to try to come back. I tried, I don't know how much I should say here, but let's just say I applied to go in as well during one of these medical convoys to Gaza, and I was also turned away, in a chaplaincy role, unfortunately, very quickly. So before I could even make my way to Jordan or try to get in any of the established routes. But, what's amazing is that every Palestinian, I don't want to say every Palestinian, but every Palestinian that I know believes that they will return home, still has an attachment. Like my wife is also Palestinian, born in diaspora, born in Louisiana. Different story, but we tell our kids, who are now, of course, another generation removed, that when the time comes, we're going to go live in Palestine, even for a year or two, just to reclaim our homes. We want to go back, right? Even though we've never been. So it's deeply rooted in our hearts. It's deeply rooted in our consciousness. And the amazing thing is that I think that our oppressors really do underestimate. They've historically underestimated the attachment that every Palestinian has to the land, right? My kids, whose Arabic is as broken as can be, and I apologize to them because they'll probably hear this and not be happy about it. But broken Arabic, we're trying to get it right. Never been to Palestine, but they claim it. They wear it proudly, right? It's in their heart. It's on their minds. It's a part of us, right? So we've been nurtured in this identity and in this cause. And we're not going anywhere. We're just not going to go away. And I think that's the Palestinian superpower in terms of resistance, is existence as a Palestinian. So we're not going anywhere.
You mentioned this idea that it's deeply embedded in every single Palestinian, that they want to return home. Now, a very different story because I'm about to speak about Syria, because obviously this is, there's been an ethnic cleansing that occurred started before 1948. Right. Went into acceleration in 1948. Israel is very much a secular colonial entity. In Syria, there was a massive, horrible dictator, because of a big war. and his oppression, people, 10 million people were either internally or externally displaced. And we've seen in the last year, Syria still has a lot of problems. It needs to go a long way, but the dictator's gone, and they can start rebuilding. And there were lots of refugees still have not yet returned because there's no homes to return to, but they can start the process. And it was literally like almost a year ago while this was happening, that the rebels liberated Damascus. As a Palestinian, when you saw that, and as a Muslim and as an Arab, how did you feel?
I was incredibly happy for the people, to be honest with you. Look, it's like I've been to Syrian refugee camps almost annually over the last decade plus, and it's deeply moving. I mean, so every year we go to Jordan, see our family, and spend some time as well on the border. The camps there, Mafraq, even at some point got into Dar'a during those horrible atrocities that we were watching. Like, I've met people from Ghouta, exclusive refugee camps, that witnessed those massacres in Ghouta. I believe some of the videos that are coming out now speak about like sort of Bashar mocking the people of Ghouta. So look, when it first happened, I think every one of us was like, wow, I grew up with Syrians. I grew up with an attachment to Syria. My mother was born there, like I said. Our best friends growing up were Syrian, and going there, like, it was incredible, to witness it. And I think that one of the things that everyone had sort of given up on Syria. That's actually the point, right? Everyone thought that this was an impossible situation. But you see people coming out of those prisons, those underground prisons. It's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, like, on a human level, to witness that as a Muslim, as a human being, someone who was attached to the Syrian cause, like, I immediately saw, and I think that's the point of humanizing people, the same little children that I came to know, whose names I know, right? And I could start saying them, and an image will come up in my head every time I say the name of Mahmoud or Ragad or Hanan, or like, these names come up, and there are images of Syrian children that come up, some of them with the scars, the visible scars and the invisible scars that I met in Jordan. And every single person that I saw coming out of those prisons looked like them, right? Resembled them. That's someone to me. So as a Palestinian, obviously there is an element of what does this mean for Palestine? There's no doubt. But as a human being, as a Muslim, I was just happy for them, right? And I was in this part of the world when it all happened, and my favorite words were Uqbal Palestine. Inshallah, Palestine will one day feel this as well, this freedom, this joy. Till now, you meet many Syrians and they say, Uqbal Palestine, Palestine will be next, inshallah. Now, with all that being said, there's still a lot of uncertainty about Syria and what this is going to mean. So, two things, and I tell people this, like, you can hold these two truths, that Bashar was a nightmare, an incredible tyrant, and that there's no justification to whitewash his crimes, and that the people of Syria deserve freedom from that tyrant. And the second one is, like, we're very worried about what's going to transpire now with the development of Syria, right? How shackled will this nation be? How sanctioned will this nation be? How capable will this nation be to represent the genuine aspirations of the people? You will not meet a single Syrian that's not pro-Palestinian. And I have not met a single Palestinian, right, that isn't absolutely, in a complete state of jubilation over the fact that the people of Syria had their freedom. Like, I've never met a person from Palestine in Palestine that was for the oppression of the Syrian people, or that was justifying the crimes against the Syrian people. But again, there's a lot of uncertainty. Like, what does this mean? The people themselves, they want Palestine. They genuinely care about Palestine. They want to rebuild their country that's been stolen from them, but they have genuine aspirations for Palestine. So we just hope that as Syria takes shape, this new Syria, that it's not shackled, that it's not sanctioned, that what comes about genuinely represents the aspirations of the people. And we pray for their success, truly, pray for their success in that regard.
Okay. You mentioned when 9/11 happened, you were outside studying, outside of the USA. Where were you studying? And again, I've kind of asked you this question already, but like clearly this meant that whatever you were studying and you were studying Islam, I'm assuming, was informed by a massive political movement, which kind of then already you've already been politicized, but it further reinforces that politicalization of your Islamic training, right? So where were you studying, and just what's your comments on what I said?
Yeah, I was in Sharjah in the UAE,
Okay.
which was very different at the time. It was a very different political reality, right? When you go back that long to Sharjah in the UAE, I'd say that the way that I was interpreting the world based upon studying Islam in a traditional setting, while also sort of looking back at this world that I had come out of, was that what is in these books informs what is being experienced now in so many ways that we probably don't appreciate, right? So sort of gearing up, if you will, to come home and to meet friends that will now be ultra suspicious of me, to also be ready to confront the reality of Islamophobia that, to be honest with you, I didn't really know growing up. Like I knew, let me put it to you this way, growing up in Louisiana, I was more likely to be discriminated against because someone would just assume that I was a light-skinned African-American, like I was Creole, which was the assumption. I went to an all-black school. Most people would just assume that when they saw me. So I was more likely to be a victim of, ironically, anti-black racism than anti-Muslim bigotry, because there's just a lot of curiosity about Islam growing up. Like, what Muslim, like, what does that even mean, right? So that was my experience. So when 9/11 happened, coming back, like, that's a new reality altogether. People I'd grown up with, our neighbors, right? Like, what are y'all doing? Like, I literally had a friend that told other people, like, hey, I think Omar joined the Taliban or something. So it's like, I remember those comments, coming back. Like, it was simple, but it was very telling. It was very revealing in that regard. So it was sort of reconciling, like this spiritual fuel that I was gaining with the spiritual mission that I was going to have upon returning, that this wasn't just going to be coming back and being an imam in a community. This was going to be coming home, right, to the United States and confronting an entirely different reality than the one that I left.
Okay, I mean, you mentioned that what you were learning in the books informed the reality. Gaza has kind of changed this for a lot of Islamic thinkers and Islamic scholars, but many Islamic scholars don't necessarily do that. In fact, they sometimes make an intentional, like, we're not going to try to get involved in politics. We're not going to try to be too political. Just where do you think that comes from, that kind of thinking, and how do you see that trend moving?
Look, I think that the reality, unfortunately, for many Islamic scholars is that they are entirely beholden to the governmental frameworks that are put out for them, and they're not able to challenge official government policy. And there are those that have taken risks and that have put forth those challenges, and for many of them, unfortunately, they've been thrown into prisons, right, and completely removed from having not just any public role, but also even from their families, right, and enjoying their private lives sort of away from the spotlight. You have those that have opted for silence, right, and that just try to stay out of the way, right, and not be used as government mouthpieces, but at the same time, still sort of keep the spiritual tradition alive and indicate, right, that Islam requires of you X, Y, Z to take clear stances against injustice. So they've indicated, they have shown, through their sermons or through their writings, that their sentiments certainly lean a certain way, but they can't say things explicitly. And then you have those, unfortunately, that are completely sold out to establishments. They exist everywhere, right? And they justify the unjustifiable, and worse, give it a religious languaging, right? I can't even say religious grounding, because it's so superficial that anyone can see right through it, right? And that's where you have like the Abraham Accords and many of these arrangements that have come about that justify normalization with Israel, that justify, in many ways, even the destruction of Gaza, right? That just justify everything. So these actors have justified things like Rabaa before in Egypt. They've justified massacres and all sorts of violations of people, in regards to their rights and their dignity, collectively or individually, prior to Gaza. So it's not surprising. So it's a challenge. And I recognize, by the way, let me say this, the privilege in that regard of being able to hold these positions, right? Look, there's no doubt that being a Palestinian American, right, Muslim, I have more range to speak about these issues than other people do. It doesn't mean there aren't threats to us. That doesn't mean there aren't real difficulties, especially that we're facing in the wake of Trump 2.0. But what it does mean is that we have a responsibility that comes with that privilege, right? If Western Muslims can speak on things that other Muslims can't, then they should do their best to represent those sentiments in the most authentic way. And more importantly than all of that, in a way that's pleasing to their Lord, right? That's the whole point of sincerity, is that you seek His favor over the favor of all else, and you seek virtue over comfort, that you try to uphold justice even if it's against yourselves. So that with that privilege comes great responsibility.
You just kind of looking at what's happening in America through the lens of your sort of life and childhood. So you mentioned, when you were growing up, the racism you received most of the time was almost because that people thought you were a light-skinned black person, and so it was anti-black racism. Now there's Islamophobia. You mentioned Genocide Joe and the democratic establishment and how they are superficial and fragile. We mentioned Trump 2.0. How do you see that future, especially given the fact that someone like Mamdani has now, he's been the mayor of New York? Do you think that's a substantial change? Do you think the society is changing in some way? Just what's your reflections on that?
I think, look, there are certain things about America that are definitely changing. There's an awakening of sorts towards Israel's atrocities that predate the genocide, as well as towards the privileging of Israel's interests over America's interest, and that has rubbed many of the America First folks the wrong way. So you see fractures on the right, you see fractures on the Democrat side. You see a clear generation gap, that younger people are far more inclined to question some of these old narratives that have led to not just the destruction of Palestine, but the destruction of the Muslim world as a whole, and to the destruction of their own capital, right? And resources, and their own futures, right? And especially their children's futures. So you see the fault lines on both sides, right and left, right? And you see the generation gap. Mamdani, definitely his election represents the collapse of AIPAC, the collapse of many of these groups and these funders, right? I mean, I'm always happy when Zionist billionaires lose a lot of money on anything, right? On a race, or trying to displace him from the entire electoral process. Like, it was nice to see that part, but at the same time, like, I don't think that at the policy level Mamdani is going to be revolutionary in any way. I think that he's going to end up caucusing with sort of a center-left progressive Democratic front. So I think that we take from that, on this issue of Palestine in particular, that there's a lot that's encouraging, right? That with his election, there's a lot that's encouraging with the election of folks across the country that were on the opposite side of AIPAC's wrath, and groups that tried to, tarnish them as anti-Semites. Like, that accusation is not working as well anymore. It's losing potency. It's losing its fuel, despite all the money that's being thrown at it. But what I'll say is this, perhaps in closing, is that Israel also recognizes that there's a direct correlation between the Islamophobic vitriol online that it fuels and the sympathies towards it, despite its greatest crimes and atrocities. And so they pump that machine of Islamophobia. There are multiple studies to show this, because there is a correlation. When people are more afraid of Muslims, or when people are made to be paranoid about Muslims and Islam taking over the country, then they lose sight of the evil that regime is carrying out against the Palestinian people, as well as the way that it has historically been entrenched in American politics and actually, right, undermined and taken over multiple institutions that infringe upon our freedoms as Americans. So it's a distraction, it's a deflection, it's replacing a very real threat with a false threat, with an exaggeration of the Muslim community, but it works, right? And Zionist propaganda is relentless. So as the world is changing as fast as it is, and as a new social media platform pops up every other hour, and a new voice defects from the pro-Israel crowd, you can see that they're trying to control the digital architecture as fast as it's growing, by acquisition, by fueling bots and campaigns online. So you can see that they're trying to buy out Paramount and CBS and Netflix and TikTok, obviously, right? So the Zionists are panicking, and that's always a good thing. That shows you that there's power that the people actually have. I always say that I put my faith in God, not government, and I put my hope in people, not politicians. So we're seeing that people power, it's working. So we have to just keep at it and keep improvising as they keep acquiring.
I'm Suleiman, just a final question. I mean, you've been very generous with your time, and I thank you for that. As you're sort of coming towards our podcast booth, I guess, at the Doha Forum, you will constantly stop by people, and I mean, you clearly are a valuable human being. So again, thank you for your time. Okay. I mean, the final question isn't really a question from me. It's just, what would be your final words, really? Not final words, because I'm sure you'll speak again, inshallah. But just, in this episode of the podcast, to those who are listening, just what's your final thoughts, reflections, a message that you want to give?
If we allow for the Palestinian cause to symbolically be buried under the rubble once again, then we will be guilty for Gaza 2.0 as well. What comes next, right? So there's a lot of symbolism that Gaza right now is the result of decades of neglect. Let's not neglect this cause again and find ourselves in an even worse situation, right? And it's hard to even think about what could be possibly worse than this, but let's not bury our heads in the sand or in the rubble again and let the Palestinian cause be buried. We have to keep at it. Apartheid precedes genocide. We are so angered when someone starts off the conversation with October 7th, October 7th, October 7th, as if nothing happened prior to October 7th. Well, we also have to be mad at ourselves if we end the conversation with this paper ceasefire that is doing very little to actually end the misery that's been inflicted on the Palestinian people all around. So,
Imam Omar Suleiman, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum.